Welcome to Less Than 15, a show for busy business owners brought to you by DFK Australia, New Zealand. Each week we deliver bite-sized, actionable insights from industry experts so you're across the issues that really matter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus. Let's dive into this week's topic. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of the Less Than 15 podcast. Now, we've all heard about and possibly even been impacted by the recent famous cybersecurity incident around the world, CrowdStrike, Optus, Medibank, but it doesn't have to be that level of problem to really be painful and expensive and even debilitating for a business. And thankfully, there are things that you can do in the cybersecurity world to protect you and your biggest business assets. And that's why we have our fabulous guest here today, Christina Arcane, who is the director of Inspire Cyber and is really focusing on helping organizations like you have, our lovely listeners, with building up the knowledge that they need to navigate this sometimes complex cyber world. So, Christina, thank you so much for sharing your expertise here with us today.
You are so welcome.
Well, let's dive in first of all with some of the learnings that we can take from CrowdStrike, etc. I think you also said that there were some other incidences even closer to home. So what can we learn from those things that all made us cringe and go, oh my goodness, we're quite vulnerable?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many more data breaches and cyber incidents that happen in the industry that we don't hear about because they're not as interesting for the media to pick up on, or they're not costing 140 million. They're costing, less than 1 million for some businesses, paying ransoms at, 35,000, 50,000. A few other things like Sony, The Iconic, Guzman Y Gomez, Dan Murphy's, all brands that are being impacted in smaller ways. And I think the key learnings here, if I break it down, the first one is IT and cybersecurity are not the same. This is evident across all of them. There was a breakdown in something that happened at the human level where security issues were just assumed by IT people or by non-IT people thinking IT people were taking care of it. I really do just want to ask the right questions to make sure everyone is on the same page when it comes to cybersecurity. So that's just number one.
So just on that point, what should we actually ask our IT guys and girls to see if they are taking care of that? Are there specific things we should be asking?
Absolutely. You can firstly ask, how are we aligning to the Australian government's Essential 8 that cyber.gov.au has? Because that is a really good framework just to be a baseline of questions. How are we doing our backups? How are we doing our updates? Just to make sure that they have a plan. And often if they do have a plan, that will strike the conversation to ask more questions to say, well, what is the plan and how can I help? When do we have to revisit this to make sure that we're securing our organization? So the Essential 8 is a really good starting point to engage your IT teams to make sure you're covered.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure that we put a link to those Essential 8 strategies on cyber.gov.au in the show notes. It's a great place to open the conversation. What else can we take away from these incidents?
The other thing, and I know everyone is going to cringe when they hear this one, is password reuse. First of all, I don't blame you. We all do so many little micro habits online that each one we create a new account. We shop here, we shop there, we buy this. All of that builds up. And before you know it, you might have the same password for over 100 accounts. If you use your password across even 2 of those, you could be subject to a cyber incident. In fact, The Iconic was subject to that incident with credential stuffing. So basically, a hacker takes your password from one site and plugs it into another. And because you've used the same password, that's how they get in. And that's one of the most common causes of hackers getting into organizations and infiltrating the information or taking the system down so that they're not operational. So don't reuse your passwords is the biggest piece of advice I would give anyone, hands down.
I know I've been in this scenario before. I actually did get a password manager. And it's just that shortcut because we're busy without thinking that down the line it could turn to something really quite horrendous. But it's not an easy fix. One of the things that I love when I was learning about you as a guest for the show is the way that you differentiate between perimeter security and internal security. Could you break that one down for us, please?
Absolutely. And if you think of a house, and we've got 2 components. We've got the fence around the house. That's your perimeter security. What's stopping from anyone getting into the house in the first place? And the controls, in that analogy could be you have CCTV footage, maybe you have a guard dog as well, you have locks on the gates. Controls in an IT environment for that are things like your passwords, Do you have MFA, which, by the way, is if you get that code messaged to your mobile device to get you into a website after you put your password in? Have you got access management in place around the outside? So there's lots of different controls around the outside to stop them from getting in. However, that's just the first stage of a cyber attack. Once a hacker gets in, it's not like he finds the gold straight away. There's often a bunch of other navigation that they have to conduct inside the organization to get what they're looking for. So this is what we call internal security, where we're looking at the controls that prevent them from accessing different bits of information, navigating to different user accounts. And that could be things like, where are your employees saving information? Is it on your computer or is it in a cloud service? That could make the difference between an attacker finding its way to very sensitive information and not. Because at this stage, we really don't want to assume that we're doing our best to stop them from getting in, and that's it. If they can't get in, we're not at risk. It's just not the case. As we said with password reuse, is ripe. They're going to get in. So when they get in, what can we do internally to stop them from causing damage to our organization?
I love that, when differentiation. You mentioned the MFA, which is the multi-factor. What's the third word? Multi-factor
authentication.
Thank you. And I think sometimes that can feel frustrating. Again, if we're thinking short term, as opposed to thinking the longer term and the implications from there. Like when I get into Xero, for example, I've got MFA, and so that's a simple step. It's like putting the electric fence around as well as bolting the gate, so to speak.
Yeah, or locking the door, having those big bolts on the front door. So even if they do breach that outside, they're not getting in to the main component.
So what was access control?
Access controls. So these ones are really important because it's not just about a single user having access. You also have your partners and third parties that you may integrate with if they're having access to your systems. You'll have servers with the big computers that support your organization. They have access permissions. So access is all the different ways that someone can conduct an activity within your organization. And you want to make sure that's really clean and kept nice and tight. So if you're an organization, everyone has access to email, possibly MS Teams or Google Meets, depending on what software you use. Great, that's an everyone type of technology. But there are some software tools in your organization that only certain people should have access to. Right. And you should keep that quite simple. And every so often, you should review that and get rid of those who no longer need access to that tool. So this could be your finance department has special permissions in certain tools. Your HR department has special permissions. And, if someone leaves the organization, you should turn that access off because you just don't know if they get compromised. You don't really have visibility over what's going on if they've still got access to those systems and tools.
Okay, and there's so many different factors there. That's why having this conversation with your IT person or bringing someone else in to help is so important. Okay, so I've made it past the door, but the good stuff is locked away in the safe, so I can't get to it as a hacker. Is the concept again that I'm hearing in my head. So, was there anything else there that we should highlight before we keep moving?
Absolutely. Your employees, your people, you're going to hear they're the weakest link in the chain. I honestly believe they are the strongest. They are the most targeted because it's a lot easier for a hacker to target people who are vulnerable in our everyday workday. If I'm stressed or I've got too much going on, I'm going to be more susceptible to clicking on a link or saving a document outside of a standard process. And that's what makes an organization insecure. So really helping your people use your technologies the right way, the secure way, and just make it really clear. Give them a community. Help them ask questions so that they know that they're doing it right and can navigate the workday confidently. Then you know that your people are doing right by the organization. But you need to help them get there because after all, we're only human.
Absolutely.
We need a little bit of expertise and help in our everyday.
And I guess it's also with having an appreciation as the why behind why I've been asked to do this thing so I can understand what it means down the line as opposed to that quick fix when we're in the midst of a busy, demanding day where we might be tempted to take a shortcut because we don't have an appreciation for what the repercussions.
Exactly.
So I guess this is where the education process is so important to protect your organisation. So if we were thinking of putting together an education program, can you give us some sort of ideas about some touch points that really should be covered?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am going to direct you to that cyber.gov.au website as well, because they have beautifully laid out topics. But the key topics you really want to hit is phishing emails, how to spot and detect a phishing email, you want to make sure that they've got MFA set up on all their channels. So that starts with explaining what MFA is, because a lot of people don't know, and that's okay. You want to make sure that you cover off things like how to recognize a domain, an email address or a website. How do you know there's a real one from a fake one? That's quite important. And when they do come across a fake website, once they do detect it, not to put in their username and password, because that's how hackers get hold of our credentials. They put them in on that site. You want to teach them about strong passwords. That's a really good one as well. And you also want to teach them basic cyber hygiene across file sharing. So how do they convert a file, whether it's to a partner or internally, the safest way? Because when files start flying everywhere, you get a very messy environment, and that's how an attacker gets hold of the information. 4 key topics that you might want to consider.
I love that concept of cyber hygiene. It's not an expression that I've heard before. I'll ask a personal question that may be relevant to the listeners as well. If I have a document, let's say I've got a PDF and I don't have Adobe and I want to reduce the file size, which I can often do on my Mac, but not always, or if I want to convert a PDF and I don't have the software. Is there a danger involved in uploading a PDF or another document into those websites that does that converting stuff for you? Okay, scare me out of this habit, please.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing I notice is that identifying a legitimate versus illegitimate website is one of the hardest things for humans to do, because it can get very tricky. I am trained in it, and even sometimes I'm stopped questioning myself. Hold on a second. Is this the real website? Because IT is tricky when it comes down to it. But at the end of the day, what you're doing, so you know, is you're uploading a document with your company information to somebody else. And they now have it. You don't know where they're storing it, if they're sharing it, how long they're storing it for. So you are officially giving it to someone. Even though if they say it's safe and protected, they may not be legitimate. Yeah. So you really want to check if you're an end user with your organization, what is the approved way of doing this? And if we don't have one, well, guess what? Call your IT department, and that's your first question alongside the Essential 8, because you need one.
So that is just, with me doing a little confession there on the show. That's another example of, I've got to do this quickly. Where's a quick solution? Which in the short term may give you joy, but in the long term could really cause some problems. That education piece is so incredibly important. So is there any other key point that you would like to leave our listeners as they're upskilling themselves in this area?
Really remember that it's a complex environment, and to take it one step at a time. Don't get frustrated. Don't coerce employees into, you have to listen to this. This is what we have to do, because barriers aren't broken down, especially when it comes to learning, when we push as a negative consequence for them. Yeah. So especially when it comes to phishing, if someone clicks on a phishing link, the response shouldn't be, you've done something wrong. We really need to look at this. It should be, okay, let's dissect what happened. How can we help? Because only together as a community can we overcome those challenges.
Yes.
And be better at working every day.
That's a great point, and understanding that this could happen to anyone. So let's turn this into a learning opportunity so that we can prevent it in the future, which is really what cybersecurity as a whole is about.
Yes, because it's not going anywhere. No. We're all online. We have more and more accounts every year. I swear there's 100 extra accounts on my password manager, because it's everything we do. So we really need to start paying attention to it now.
Oh, that's brilliant. Christina, this has been very educational and action-oriented for me in particular. I know what I'm not going to be doing going forward, so really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. It was such a joy. Thanks, Angela.
And our lovely listeners, hopefully you are aware and not afraid that there are actions that you can take, even if it just starts with that conversation with your IT department. How are we handling the cybersecurity? And you'll find, along with links to the government website that we referred to, there is also a download that Christina has provided for us about launching your employee cybersecurity program. So thank you so much for your time today. And we look forward to bringing you some more actionable insights on the show again next week. Take care. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Less Than 15 and have a fresh idea or two to take action on. Hit the subscribe button so you catch every bite-sized business bulletin. And we'd love you to leave a review or perhaps share the episode with a friend. Less Than 15 is brought to you by accountants and business advisors DFK Australia New Zealand, helping business owners make better decisions through local knowledge, national connections, and global reach. We'll be back next week with more valuable insights to help you and your business grow.